Welcome, everyone, to Stories Round the Table with Hudson and Joni. We're here to bring you tales as sweet as a glass of sweet tea on a hot summer day. From the rolling hills of Tennessee to the dusty trails of Texas, we've got stories that'll make you tap your boots and clap your hands. On our podcast, we interview amazing country songwriters and singers, sharing stories of love lost and found, of cowboys and outlaws, and of the simple joys of country living. So grab a seat, pour yourself a drink, and get ready to be transported to a world where the stars shine bright and the music never stops. Whether you're a city slicker or a country bumpkin, there's something here for everyone. So sit back, relax, and join us on a journey through the heart of America. Welcome to Stories Round the Table with Hudson and Joni.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Stories Round the Table with Hudson and Joni. Today we have a very special guest with us, a true gem in the world of country music. Justin Trevino is a name that resonates deeply within the country music community. Known for his rich traditional sound, Justin has been captivating audiences for years with his heartfelt lyrics and soulful voice. Born and raised in Texas, Justin's love for country music started at a young age. Influenced by legends like Ray Price and Faron Young, he has carved out a niche for himself, staying true to the roots of country music while adding his unique touch. From his early days in local Texas honky-tonks to headlining major country music festivals, Justin's journey is a testament to his passion and dedication to the genre. With hits like Texas Honky Tonk and One More Drink, Justin has not only kept the traditional country sound alive, but has also inspired a new generation of country music fans.
You're looking at me like you know me. Well, you do, and it's good to see you again. But it's been some time since I saw you. Oh, and I've seen some changes since.
Today, we dive deep into Justin's musical journey, explore his inspirations, and get a glimpse of what it's like to live the life of a true country music artist. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and join us as we welcome the one and only Justin Trevino.
Welcome to Stories Around the Table with Hudson and Joni. And let's just dive right into this.
Yes, sir.
I suppose my first question, and then I'll hand it over to Joni, is what truly made you want to jump into music at such an early age?
My dad. My dad was not a musician, but he was an avid fan and record collector. And actually, he named me after Justin Tubb. If you're Hudson, you may not be familiar with Justin. I know Joni is. Justin was the firstborn son of Ernest Tubb, and Justin was my dad's favorite songwriter. And he wrote a big song called Lonesome 77203, which Hawkshaw Hawkins had the first hit with that in 1963, and then 10 years later, Tony Booth had a big hit record with it again in 73. And but Justin wrote a lot of songs. Aside from that one, there was a great song called Love Is No Excuse. That was one of Justin's. Anyway, Justin was my dad's favorite writer, and so that's how I got the name. And my earliest memories is sitting in front of the record player with my dad playing me. He loved all the Grand Ole Opry stars of that era. So we were listening to, of course, Ernest Tubb and Hank Snow and Charlie Walker, Gene Shepard, Jeannie Seeley, Connie Smith, so Jack Green, Cal Smith. So that was the beginnings of it. When I was 7 years old, I told my parents I wanted a guitar, and actually she's not really my aunt. She is she's my aunt by marriage is sister. So she's not blood kin to me, but she's kind of family. Her name is Juanita. and she lives down in Brownsville, Texas. She bought me my first guitar. She went across the border to Mexico and bought me a little classical guitar, and that was the guitar that I started learning on when I was about 7 years old, and I never looked back, man. You know how most teens, at some point, not me. It was always hardcore country music from the get-go, and that never changed. So.
Me too. Well, one of the favorite things that I have to pipe in here and say just cracked me up, Justin, was I saw that, because I got similar stories about you being in the shopping cart with your mom when you were 4 or 5 years old, and then belting out a song of Johnny Cash's right in front of the cashier, and how she asked your mom if he knew any.
Delia's gone, and if anybody knows the words, I was singing the verse where it says, "First time I shot her in the side. Hard to watch her suffer, but with the second shot she died." Now, I'm 4 years old singing this in the shopping cart, and this little old lady behind us says, "Doesn't he know any nursery rhymes?"
Oh, gosh. That is hilarious. I bet, what's your mom? She probably got a funny look on her face, but thought, oh, well.
Yeah, probably so. Mom listened to hardcore country because she married my dad. You know what I mean? She was not as passionate about the music. I mean, she loves music, but she'll listen to whatever's on the radio. Where my dad had very strong opinions about what was country and what wasn't.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, I've got something similar to that. I mean, this is all we really knew was. I loved singing. We didn't know what we were singing necessarily at that age. Just would sing. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Now, do you have brothers and sisters, or just you?
Just me.
Okay.
Just me.
So
I was the only child.
Well, your dad and your mom have to be awful proud of everything that you've been able to accomplish and do through the years. That's for sure.
Well, I certainly hope so. We lost Dad about 8 years ago. He passed in 2016. My mom is doing good. She actually lives in 2011. She moved to Brady, Texas, where my wife and I live, and so we get to see Mom just about every day.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Good deal.
Yeah.
Now, are you writing some songs, or are you just mostly doing covers? Or I know you're a big fan of.
You know what? I do write. I don't write as much as I should, or as much as I'd like to. But I'm actually working on a new album right now, which is the first thing I've recorded in a while, and I've got 2 original songs on this album, and the rest are either covers or songs that I've managed to get my hands on from other writers. But I've always written. That's another, of course, my dad being a big Justin Tubb fan. Writing was something that he encouraged and even helped me do in the very beginning. He and I kind of wrote some songs together when I was real young, and then I kept writing. So.
Oh, that's neat. That's really cool. By all means.
Yeah.
And is it mostly swing still? You staying true to your swing roots?
So I draw a line, and some people lump them together. I consider the Ray Price Shuffle, and that's what a lot of people like to call it. I consider the Ray Price Shuffle to be hardcore country. Some people lump it in with Western swing, but to me, Bob Wills and Milton Brown and that whole tradition of Western swing is a little more jazz-oriented than the Ray Price, Johnny Bush type stuff. So I love Western swing, don't get me wrong, but I've never considered myself a Western swing artist per se. I do a little. We always do Faded Love on the shows, and we usually do Home in San Antonio, which is one of my favorite Bob Wills tunes. But of course, we do a lot of shuffles with the twin fiddles and the pedal steel guitar.
I love it. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I get that. I mean, I have been categorized quite a bit as a, complete Western artist. And really, I think of myself more as classic country. I just like the real deal. And, like you just said, fills and steals and make sure that, I mean, it's not country music without that, in my opinion.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, this new album that I'm working on, my plan was to do an acoustic album, but the one caveat to that is that I don't think I'll ever do an album without steel guitar. And so I went ahead and put pedal steel on my quote-unquote acoustic album. So that's the one thing on there that's not acoustic.
I love it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
a lot of guys would have said, well, why not dobro? And I love a good dobro player, but it's just not the same. I got to have pedal steel.
Absolutely. I've always admired your commitment to keeping those traditions alive. What's your favorite part about performing true Western country music?
Man, I'm just passionate about the music itself. When I'm on stage, I'm focused on trying to sing well and trying to entertain the audience. Jeannie Seeley told me one time, and it was told to her by Farron Young. So we're talking about two of the best singers ever in the history of this music. Farron told her, and she passed it along to me. She said, Farron said there's a lot of great singers out there. And, you can find nearly every town you go to, you can find somebody that sings in the local church choir that can really sing. But an entertainer will always work. So aside from singing good, you try to engage with the audience and give them a chance to get to know you a little bit, So that's part of it. I've about 2 years ago, I picked up, when I was very young, I played a little bit of fiddle. Never considered myself a fiddle player, but I set it down, and for many years, probably about 36 years, I was my own bass player in my band. And when everything shut down for COVID, around the house I started playing the fiddle again. And by the time that year had come and gone, I was getting bold enough to want to play fiddle on stage. So a couple years ago, I hired a bass player, a dear friend of mine from Menard, Texas, named Rome Hill. And I hired a bass player, and I moved myself over to fiddle. So that's a challenge. I'm not going to lie to you. But when I'm performing, I'm really focused on trying to play well and sing well and try to be entertaining for the folks.
Amazing. Now, you told me a story the other day about you and Johnny Bush.
Yes.
You want to dive into that a little bit?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I can remember being 7 years old, going down the road with my dad, and John's recording of Whiskey River, which was recorded in 1972 for RCA Records, that came on the radio. And I asked my dad, I remember this, 7 years old. I asked my dad, I said, who is that? He said, that's Johnny Bush. The vibrato got my attention. I'd never heard anybody sing like that before. And I became just completely enamored with John singing. By the time I was 10 years old, I was scouring the record stores, all of John's records were out of print at that time. He was between record labels, and RCA had quit manufacturing the 4 albums that he had done for them. And he had a couple of records in the early 1980s on a small independent label called Delta. That was owned by David Stallings at the time. David Stallings is still around. He actually does a comedy stick where he calls himself Willie P. Richardson. I don't know if y'all have heard any of that. But that was a gentleman that actually used to own Delta Records. And they put out some good records in the early 80s. But anyway, getting back to my story, when I was trying to collect the Johnny Bush albums, they were all out of print. And I would go to secondhand record stores and half-price books and anywhere I could and look for Johnny Bush records. That took several years till I finally got all of them. And I remember the first time I went to see him perform, I think I was 13 years old. There was a radio station in San Antonio back in those days called KBUC, KBUC. And they would have an annual listener appreciation party. And the first time I went, they had Johnny Bush and Daryl McCall. They had some other people, but they had Johnny Bush and Daryl McCall, and that's why I was there. And I got to see those guys for the first time live that day. And then after that, for the next few years, and actually I started my band when I was 14, so I was already gigging when I was 14 years old. But for the next few years, if I had a night off, and if John was playing somewhere, I would go see him. And during that first times that I saw him, I never really introduced myself. I would go shake his hand, and one time I asked him for a guitar pick. I didn't tell him I was a singer. I just said, "Do you have a pick?" And of course, here I'm a teenage kid. He handed me a pick, which I kept for years, and somewhere along the way I lost it. But anyway, let me get to the part of the story that I know you want me to tell. When I was 18 years old, so okay, now we've, another 5 years of this come and gone, and I've been going to his dances and stuff, but I was never the kind of guy to go up to somebody and go, "Hey, I'm a singer," so I'd never shared that with him. I didn't really know him, When I was 18 years old, John was playing every other week at a place in San Antonio called the Eisenhower Flea Market. Inside this, if you can imagine, this huge indoor flea market, they had a venue called the Red Eye Saloon. And that gentleman that owned that was a guy named Harry Weiss. And he and John were really close. And John was playing there every other week, every other Sunday. Well, I got wind of that. And I went to see him, and the first time we went, man, we had a great time. I think I got one of my albums autographed, and 2 weeks later, my girlfriend and I, who is now my wife, we went back to see him again, and he wasn't there. And I was really disappointed, but they were having a jam session. And I told Sissy, I said, "Well, we've already made the trip to San Antonio here, so I might as well sing, So I signed up for this jam session, and I got up there with a bunch of musicians that I had never met at the time, and I sang a couple of Johnny Bush songs. Now, one thing for your listeners is they don't know, and I don't talk about it a lot, but it's pertinent to this story. I can't see. And because I can't see and I've never been able to see, I don't have any control over my eyes. They kind of bounce. I can't control the movement of my eyes. And so Harry Weiss, the guy that owns the flea market, he took one look at me, and before I sang, he first looked at me. He thought I was drunk, and he said, "Somebody get that drunk guy off of there." Well, then I started singing, and he realized that it was not that I was drunk, it was that I just couldn't control the movement of my eyes. And so he came and introduced himself to me afterwards. He said, "Man, I owe you an apology. I really thought you were drunk." And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Well, you sound like Johnny Bush." I said, "Well, that's no accident." I said, "As a matter of fact, I came here today expecting to see John, or I didn't call him John. I didn't know him back then. But I said, I came here expecting to see him, and he's not here." And Harry said, "Yeah." He said, "Some of the other venues got wind that he was working for me cheaper than he was working for them, and we had to quit. We had to quit doing that." He said, "But he's my best friend. Would you like to meet him?" I said, "I'd love to meet him." And he said, if I can get him to come over here next week, will you come back?" I said, "Absolutely." Well, now, guys, I'd already, 18 years old. I had already had some smoke blown. I never expected. I always thought, I was always ready to be let down, always ready to be disappointed. I thought, that guy ain't going to call me, you know. So about middle of the week, I get a phone call from Harry. He said, Justin, this is Harry White. You remember meeting me? I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, well, I got John coming to the flea market this Sunday. Can you come back? I said, absolutely. So we went back over there. Unfortunately, I messed up. Harry was so looking forward to introducing the two of us, and we actually met in the men's room before Harry got the opportunity to introduce us formally. So John, he said, you Justin Trevino? I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, I've been looking forward to meeting you. He said, what time do you go on today? I said, man, I don't know, just whatever time they call me up. I said, what about you? He said, probably about 4:30. So we're sitting there, and John, he gets up on stage, and he had aside from battling a voice affliction called spasmodic dysphonia, that's something that he had dealt with since 1972. That particular day, he also had a pretty bad cold, and he sang. I remember he sang "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain," and then he said they called me on stage, and he pointed at me. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I'm a little under the weather, and that's why I sound like Kermit the Frog." He said, "But they tell me that this young man knows all of my songs." And John, one of the reasons he liked to go out there, he would work on his lead guitar playing and his fiddle playing. So he was up there with a gut string guitar in his hands playing lead guitar. He said, "I'm going to have him sing my songs, and you can look at me and listen to him." Now, talk about, I don't get nervous very often or very easily, but in that moment, I thought, oh, wow, I'm expected to do a set of Johnny Bush music with him standing right beside me playing guitar. But of course, I launched in. I mean, I wasn't gonna miss the opportunity. So I think we did Undo the Right. And the bass player, who later became a good friend of mine, the bass player didn't know the changes, and so that didn't go so well. And actually, I just remembered this when when it was over. John said, "Well, that was close." So I asked the gentleman. His name is Brent Morton, but I did not know him then. I said, "Sir, can I borrow your bass?" Because like I said, I played bass myself. I said, "Can I borrow your bass?" He said, "Sure." So he put it around my neck, and once I had the bass in my hands, I could kind of control things. And I did about 45 minutes of Johnny Bush music that day with playing lead guitar, and we became fast friends from that point on. If I went to see him, he would call me up to sing, and he and Daryl McCall had recorded an album together at the time. The album was called Hot Texas Country. And he said, "Do you know my duets that I cut with Daryl?" I said, "Yes, I do." And so we would sing some of those songs. He would call me up to set in, and we would sing some of those songs. And not too long after that, one time his front man, who was a fiddle player named Slim Robert, Slim had to be somewhere else. And the first time John called me for a paying gig, he said, "I need you to come front." He said, "Slim's got to be out of town. Can you come front the band?" It was at the Rambling Rose in Llano, Texas. And I said, "Yes, sir, I'll be there." So I went in front of the band for that job. And then his bass player at the time was a guy named Dwayne Wabra. And Dwayne is still a dear friend of mine to this day. And if Dwayne had something to go do, John would call me to play bass. And I kind of became the first call sub as a bass player for Johnny Bush. So, we got to be pretty close pretty quick. By the time I was in my early 20s, Dwayne got married, and he wanted to get off the road. And so John called me one day. He said, "Hey," "Dwayne's getting married, and he don't want to work as much. Would you consider being my steady bass player?" I said, "Man, And so I went to work for Johnny Bush in 1994, and I continued to work for him until 2005. About 11 years I was the bandolero. And, of course, I would do the first hour, and then we would bring him on, and he would do the rest of the night. Everything down here is 4-hour dancing. You know, you play from 8 to 12 or 9 to 1 most of the time. And so he put me in front of bigger audiences than I ever could have gotten in front of on my own. He got me my first record contract with a company called Lone Star TMG. That was about the year 2000. And I made 2 records for them. John, I think, did 2 or 3 albums for them. And then, and that label went belly up. Well, I hope we didn't cause it, but by this time, I was producing records and engineering records for my friend Tracy Pitcox in Brady, Texas. And Tracy has a record label called Heart of Texas Records. And Tracy had always told me, he said, "Man, I know you're on a label, but you know you have a home with us if you ever need it." Well, in 2004, Lone Star TMG folded, and I went to Tracy and I said, "Man, does your offer still stand?" He said, "Absolutely." So in 2004, I put out an album called Too Many Heartaches. That was my first album for Heart of Texas Records, and not long after that, Johnny Bush started recording records with Heart of Texas as well, and I had the pleasure of producing 3 of those albums. Most everything that John recorded in the last 20 years was either produced by me or a gentleman in San Antonio named Bill Green, and he would do some of his recording with Bill and some of it with me. But we unfortunately, John passed away in October of 2020, and very unexpectedly from double pneumonia, actually. And I sang with him. The last date that he performed was at a place called Riley's Tavern, not far from here. And I sang with him on that show, and neither one of us could have ever imagined that was going to be the last time. But I miss him. I miss him terribly. But man, he was one of those rare guys. He was one of those rare guys that if he believed in you, he would stick his neck out for you. And a lot of guys won't do that. A lot, it's understandable. Everybody has their own career to tend to. But if John believed in somebody, he would lay it on the line, and that's why he went to bat for me. I remember when the president of Lone Star TMG called me. He said, "Justin," he said, "I'm not going to lie to you." He said, I've known about you for a long time." He said, "But you got friends in high places." He said, "Johnny Bush thinks I should sign you, so we're going to do it." You know.
Wow. That's an awesome story, and one to be very proud of, and I know you are.
I am. I really am. Part of what I do. You know, John's widow told me after he passed, she said, "I'm just afraid people are going to forget." I said, "Linda, they're not going to forget it." And part of what I do is on stage all the time. And I've always done a fair amount of his material, but now it's even more paramount that I continue to do it to keep his memory alive.
That's really neat.
Joni, you have more questions?
Well, I mean, other than what was the label that you had your country stuff out on in Nashville for a while? What label were you signed to there?
Yeah, it wasn't a Nashville label really. It was a Texas label. That was Lone Star TMG. There were 2 albums on that label. Traveling Singing Man and The Scene of the Crying. And then, like I said, they went bankrupt. And when I moved over to Heart of Texas, I think we've done about 11 or 12 albums from 2000. I mean, I've been with Heart of Texas for the last 20 years. Boy, that's hard to believe. But I haven't. Of course, I wear multiple hats because not only am I a recording artist for these guys, I also do most of their production as a recording engineer and record producer. So that's been a long relationship. Tracy Pitcox is one of my dearest friends, and we just keep on keeping on, you know.
Well, you know, the thing that you need to be the most proud of is that you have done it your way and made your style of music, and, you know, never got caught up in the different directions that country music can try to take you. And, you know, I really respect that, Justin. I mean, that's really great. You've put a lot of good music out there, and there's a lot of people that love this style, and we got to keep it coming for those of us that need to be fed the real kind of music.
You know, there is the hardest part is getting the word out sometimes, and we had a pretty good run, and I don't want to get too I don't want to go too far with this, but we had a pretty good run with XM radio from about 2001 to 2012. They played us heavily on satellite radio, and that was a huge shot in the arm. A lot of people learned about it through XM.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when XM and Sirius merged, after the two companies merged, they streamlined their classic country channels. They had two. There was Willie's Place, which was the XM channel, and then there was the Roadhouse, which was Sirius's equivalent. And they decided they didn't need both of them, so they combined them and they turned that into what they now call Willie's Roadhouse.
Right.
When they did that, the decision was made to quit programming independent music. And so about 12 years ago, it's hard to believe it's been that long, about 12 years ago, we lost our spot on satellite radio. And we begged and pleaded and did everything, but there was nothing we could do about it. The decision was made. And so it's a little harder now when, you know, I'm fixing to put out this new record. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, of course, there's social media. Thank God for social media. But I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get the word out to everybody that I've got new music out, you know.
Well, you are right now.
I'll be cheering you on.
Well, thank you for that, of course.
Because we made a good jump with our promotion for the podcast this week. Not only will it be on YouTube, it's going to be on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, all of the podcast streaming platforms.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I'm very honored that I don't know how you found me, but I really appreciate you asking me to come on with you guys, and it's a pleasure to visit with you.
It was amazing. I thank you so much for being a part of it. We are going to play some of your music in this too, so I'm just going to ask, hey, can you play a song for us? And then I'll put it in later.
Okay. You know which ones you have in mind? I might have something to say about them.
You sent me a list, but why don't we discuss your two favorites?
Okay. Well, probably my favorite song that I've ever gotten from another writer is a song that Kent Finley wrote called "She Knows My Weaknesses," and I recorded that on that first album that we did for Lone Star TMG, and the album was called "Traveling Singing Man." And Kent used to host a songwriters night at a place in San Marcos called the Cheatham Street Warehouse. They're still there, and actually they'll have that very same writers night tonight. It still goes on. Unfortunately, we lost Kent a few years ago, but I was there one night, and of course Kent would always start out the night, and he would welcome everybody, and he sang this song, and it just knocked me out. And I called him the next day. I said, Kent, I got to have that song. I knew that I was right in the middle of working on that project back in 2000 or 2001, and he sent it to me, and to this day, here it is, 23 years later. This is my favorite song that anybody has ever sent me, and as a matter of fact, I like it so much that I've recorded an updated version of it on this acoustic album that we're working on right now. So that's probably my favorite. Then the other song I sent you is a song that I wrote years ago. I was actually in high school when I wrote Texas Honky Tonk, and that has kind of been my most requested song that I've written. A lot of my cohort have also taken on doing it on their shows. Jake Hooker sings it on all of his shows. Amber Digby sings it. Actually, Amber recorded it on her live DVD. So Texas Honky Tonk has been good as far as you know, stood the test of time. You know. But,
I just recently did a cover.
I'm not going to say that anything I wrote is one of my favorites, but it's done well for me. So.
Amazing.
I thank you. What a pleasure to talk with you. Yeah, I mean, just your stories and big fan of your music.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to y'all, and Joni, I'm a big fan, and I hope we get to see you somewhere here, and I really do want to get a chance to meet Olivia and listen to her sing as well.
Well, let's make it happen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Let me know when you're in Fort Worth, and if I'm off, we'll come see you guys.
Oh, that'd be fun. All right. Well, I know Hudson and I have both been looking forward to this visit, and that went by way too fast. So sometime in the near future, we'll have to do it again. But just from my side of things, just please continue doing what you're doing, because it's some mighty fine music.
Well, right back at you, and I was listening to you this weekend. I had my little Echo Dot, and I said, Alexa, play Joni Harms, and she played a bunch of your recordings. You know, the one that I remember especially, and I think you might know the gentleman. A friend of mine owned a radio station in Dublin, Texas, for a long time. His name is Sam Upshaw. And he played the fire out of Two-Steppin' Texas Blues. He used to play that record nearly every morning. So that's one that kind of sticks in my mind, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, bless his heart. I know he was a great person to have on my side. That's for sure. Yeah. He was another one of those guys that if he believed in you all the way, you know. Yeah. Sam's still with us. He does not own the station anymore, but he's still around. As a matter of fact, I saw him a couple of weeks ago. Well, good to know. If you see him again, make sure you tell him hello from me, please. I will. I certainly will. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you, Justin, so much for being a part of this. And
hey.
All right.
Take care.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
Visit Justin Trevino's official website at justintrevino.com. Discover everything about Justin Trevino, from his latest show dates and tour details to his music, song videos, and more. Stay updated with all his upcoming performances and never miss a chance to see him live. Dive into his music collection, watch exclusive videos, and explore the world of one of country music's finest artists. For all the latest news and exclusive content, head over to justintrevino.com now. Your one-stop destination for all things Justin Trevino. Stay tuned for next week's episode, where we have a very special guest joining us. We're excited to welcome Lisa Burkop, a remarkable artist celebrating over 20 years in the music industry. Lisa is not only an incredible singer and songwriter, but also a dedicated performer who has touched many hearts with her music. From her early days in Vancouver to her successful career in Nashville, Lisa's journey is filled with hit songs, award nominations, and unforgettable performances. Don't miss our conversation with Lisa Burkop next week, only on Stories Round the Table with Hudson and Joni.